Sometimes the reason that you keep failing at something over and over and over again is because you are trying to become something that you were never meant to be. Sometimes a certain combination of experiences and emotions and beliefs causes us to veer off course in our lives, and we can end up with false ideas or false beliefs about who and what we're supposed to be striving for. And sometimes the reason that this striving doesn't produce the desired outcome is because it's not supposed to, because we are trying to take ourselves off course into a direction that we were never meant to go. And when this happens, what we need to do is rather than reevaluate our strategy and look at the micro decisions we're making every day and saying, why does this keep happening to me? Do I need to change this? Do I need to change this? Do I need to change this? Sometimes what we need is a hard reset. We need to look deeper and re examine the entire course that we are taking our lives in. I know that probably sounds daunting. I'm going to this is going to ultimately be more of a philosophy video or podcast than my normal psychoeducational content. It's also going to involve a little bit more disclosure about me and my life and my history. So if you're one of those people who says, dude, just get to the point, you're probably going to either want to skip to the last minute or two of this episode or maybe just skip it entirely because this one's going to be a lot of backstory which I think is necessary to understand the principle I'm going to be articulating to you. And I also think for a lot of you, it will be relatable and interesting. So I can tell you pretty much the exact time frame when this happened to me. When I started to somewhat intentionally try to take my life in a direction that it was not supposed to go in. And it led me off course for so long. It was around age 13. I don't know exactly when, but it was age 13. I had struggled for the past couple of years prior to age 13 with difficulty making and keeping friends, probably some below average social skills, a bit of isolation, and a general sense of not fitting in with others. I just felt very different from other people. And I felt like that was the cause of the loneliness and the social difficulties that I was having. So those experiences and those struggles kind of like primed the pump for what was about to come and created this vulnerability within me where I perceived myself as having this problem that must have some solution that I had not discovered yet. For whatever reason, I think it was a specific combination of the media I ended up consuming, the people I ended up going to school with, and probably some other factors I don't fully understand. I started to develop in my mind this archetype of what I considered to be the ideally likable man. And that, of course, was who I wanted to be. And in this case, it was sort of this, I know this is like super cliche, but I wanted to be sort of this like mysterious, aloof, bad boy rebel type person because all the people I knew like that were extremely popular among both men and women. And it seemed like in a lot of the movies I was watching, the stories I was reading, the most likable character, the character I most, I guess, desired to be was that archetype. I was also getting into a lot of rock and metal music, so I was seeing a lot of people who kind of embodied this person that I wanted to be. And I became absolutely convinced that the solution to my kind of loner, outcast, maybe even loser status was to become that type of person. Unfortunately, if you had met me around that time, you would have realized that that was probably an impossible goal because I was about the farthest thing from that you could be. I was basically like a nerdy redneck, if that makes sense. And so I started this journey of trying to make myself this type of person. And I did a lot of things that I really, really regret in hindsight, down to like in my parents' home, taking down childhood photos of me and things like that. Because when people came over, I didn't want them to know my backstory. I didn't want them to see pictures of me at the farm in Nebraska or up north in Minnesota with fish and pigs and stuff like that was not the image I was trying to portray. I wanted to have complete control over my image so I could convince people that I was this type of person who I thought that I was supposed to be and hide the truth of where I came from and who I had been from them. Because I thought if anyone knew who I actually am and where I've come from, they're not going to like me, they're not going to accept me, and they're going to laugh at me. I morphed everything about myself to try to become this person. The way I dressed, the way I walked, the way I talked, my entire persona was crafted to be this archetype. And it still didn't quite work. I was somewhat able to, I guess, integrate into sort of that society of people, and they somewhat accepted me, but I always still had that exact same feeling of like I'm different from these people too. Like I am an outcast among the outcasts. And even here, although I can fake it and I can appear to fit in, I don't really belong here either. And the more I tried and the more I bought into this idea that this was the person I was supposed to be, the darker and darker my life got. And I was always aware it just wasn't quite working. I was never able to fully make myself the person who I thought I was supposed to be. I realize now that the reason for that is because I was going against my entire nature. Like I was literally trying to change my whole being because I thought that my being in the form that it was prior to all this stuff was simply unacceptable to the world and would never be good enough and would never be acknowledged. And this was probably, it culminated probably my junior year of high school. So that would be around age 16. That is the year I would say that I dropped out that year. The way I remember it is that I told my parents that I just wasn't going to school that year. And it was for a variety of reasons, but really the biggest one I think was social. It was I couldn't figure this out. I just every second of every day had the sense of like I am the wrong person. And I don't know who I'm supposed to be, and I don't know how to achieve this thing I'm trying to achieve. And no matter how obsessive I get about it, and how far I try to move my life in this direction, it doesn't seem like it's working. And I felt defeated and hopeless. Technically, I homeschooled that year, and I do have some vague memories of doing some school at home. Keep in mind, this would be 1999, I think, or 2000. It would be 2000. Homeschool now is a lot different than it was 24 years ago. There weren't virtual classes or anything like that. It was just like they mailed you the books and they hope you read them. That was, at least for the program we did, pretty much it. Um, so I essentially took junior year off from school. I also had maybe two friends, I think. Yeah, basically two friends, and then some acquaintances who were friends of their friends. I essentially did not live for a year. Like when I say I did nothing, I did nothing. Like it's so sad to think about now. But I was so frustrated and so demoralized, and I had no idea where to go next. And it was the most unexpected moment that finally started to get me out of this. I've spoken before about how my life has had many turning points. I haven't had like an overnight awakening where everything got better and everything changed. Several dominoes had to fall for me to even get started in improving my life and making headway. This was the first one. And it was the summer after junior year, the summer after I did not basically live. And I decided to go back to Minnesota for a little trip with my family. And I think I hadn't been there in a couple years. Super brief, like pre-age 13 backstory. I've always been an outdoorsman. I've always been a lover of nature, hunting, fishing, hiking, camping. I've always loved being outside. I also loved my grandparents' farm and like helping them with the hogs and trying to tame the feral cats and like that's who I really was. I was basically like a feral child. And I abandoned all that for several years when I was trying to be someone else because I didn't think that those interests and that backstory fit in with this like mysterious goth metalhead tattooed pierced person who I wanted to be and thought I was supposed to be liked and accepted by the world. I know it sounds kind of weird. If I'm a rebel, the world will accept me, but at least at that phase of life, it was kind of a viable thing. And so I go back to Minnesota with my family, which I'm still shocked I even went because I pretty much avoided them at all costs during this phase of my life. Because having a generally nice, loving, supportive family also didn't fit the archetype that I thought I was supposed to be. And it was just as it was this incredibly random. an unexpected overlap of emotions and events and circumstances that set me down this road that for 4 years dictated pretty much everything I did and who I was trying to be. It was an equally seemingly random, I'm skeptical of that now, but that's a whole other video, set of circumstances and events that started to get me out of it. And what happened is, so again, this would be 2000. So this is like the CD days, okay? There's no smartphones or MP3 players. So prior to going, it was an 8-hour drive. Bought a few new CDs, and having being back up in nature with my family, really for the first time in a while, felt my mood lift ever so slightly. And I felt a little bit of like, maybe I don't completely hate life and the world and myself and everything about the future. I mean, it was slight, but it was there. And as this was happening, as I'm there, one of the albums I bought, it was a metal album, but the lyrics were very different from normal metal lyrics. And they were somewhat, I would describe it as almost like self-improvement or self-development music. The songs really encouraged, I think it was more geared towards men, but really encouraged people to like take hold of your life and do things that actually help you and help others and like work out and learn to cook. I know that sounds like really weird. It was really weird. It was a really weird album. But something about listening to that album, because I only had like 4 CDs, so I'm listening to the same songs over and over and over again and reading the liner notes and seeing the pictures of these people and being in this place that I kind of forgot how much I loved and being with my family and having a relatively good time. I started to realize just a little bit that maybe I had just massively taken my life off course for the past 4 years. Maybe this person I was trying to be was someone I was never supposed to become, and maybe that's why it wasn't working. Because I was trying to, as cliche as it may sound, fit a round peg into a square hole. I was trying to fit in with people who were not my people. I was trying to like things I didn't totally like, and it never worked. And as I'm in this place, this is also when I started thinking about like maybe I could live here. Because one thing I was very, very certain about at that point in my life is I don't want a normal adult life. I don't want a 9 to 5 job. I don't want to live in a neighborhood. I don't want a spouse. Well, it was more that I didn't think I'd ever get one. I just didn't think anyone would ever love me. So I kind of, it wasn't that I didn't want it, I guess, as much as that I accepted it. I'm not going to have kids because I won't have a spouse. So I'm just going to be this, like, basically, I thought there's no life. But all of this stuff happening at the same time started to make me question, what if I lived here and lived this kind of life and like lived off the land and just kind of went back to my roots a little bit? And I know that's not a traditionally good life, and that's probably not what other people want for me, but maybe I could be that guy. And I felt more hope and more optimism just from this overlap of circumstances that sort of took me back to my original life trajectory from ages like 8, 9, 10, 11. Gave me a little bit of hope. Now, my journey was far from over, and I still spent the next several years of my life constantly coming to this fork in the road of like, which person am I trying to be here? And realistically, the next few years, I was still more trying to be the bad guy, so to speak, than I was kind of letting myself go back to my roots. And the best example I have of this is a few weeks after I turned 18. So I'd be a freshman in college at this point. I remember my parents came to visit and they gave me a little bit of cash, and I think it was supposed to be for books or food or something, but I used it on exactly two things. I went to Walmart and I bought Silent Hill 2. That's also a whole nother story for a whole nother video. And I took the rest of it to a tattoo parlor because I had conceptualized this like entire torso, really like dark, demonic looking tattoo that really emphasized like, this is who I am, I'm this aloof, like dangerous person, and I had $200. Now, again, this is 2001, so this is less ridiculous than it would be now. But I remember going to the tattoo parlor with this $200, and the guy's like, "You want me to do what with $200?" And when I showed him the design and the size and the scope of it, he said, that's like a $600 tattoo. It's probably a $2,000 tattoo now. And I'm like, well, what can I get for $200? He's like, well, I could do the outline of it. I said, yeah, let's do it. So he did it, and I have never finished the tattoo. I still have just an outline of this thing. And I'm not going to show it to you because I have to like take my shirt off, but it could not be a more I know I could have it removed. It's not particularly good looking, to be honest, but it is perfect because it could not more accurately represent that 5 year span of my life. Because you can clearly see what it was supposed to be. You can clearly see what it was trying to be, and it's not that. It never made it. And all of my hurt and all of my frustration, or the majority of it anyway, all of my disillusionment from this entire phase of life was because I had got this wrong idea in my head of who and what I was supposed to be. I was trying to be a person who I was not capable of being. I don't have the right personality. I don't have the right temperament. I don't have the right backstory. That's not who I am. And I was rejecting every fiber of my actual being to try to become what I thought the world wanted me to become. And I am 100% convinced that even if I had stayed on that course to this day, I still would not be the person I wanted to be. It would have never worked. I could have had a million years. It would have never worked. And it wasn't until I really and like fully accepting that was like early 20s, probably 23. I think I've often referred to this as about a 10-year period of darkness in my life. And I'd say 13 to 23 is probably about when this was. So I know that was a long personal story. And obviously there are many details omitted, but I don't want to make this too just Scott's story time here. So what I'd like you to think about, going back to kind of my original thesis statement for this video, if your life, it just seems like an endless loop of things not working and failure and frustration and disillusionment, I'm sure that's not the case for everybody. But I want you to at least consider, could I be on a path somewhat like what Scott was on in his early to mid adolescence to early adulthood? Is it possible that I have internalized some archetype or some ideal that isn't mine, that isn't really who I was meant to be, maybe even isn't really a person I am capable of being? And am I feeling hurt and frustrated and disappointed over and over and over again because I'm trying to make myself something that I'm not? Because I'm trying to force myself into a space where I was never meant to fit. And if you think that may be a part of your journey as well, then I would encourage you to think back. And I know that for some of you, there is no back. Like referencing the video I've made before, what if there's no normal to return to? I am very fortunate in that I both did and didn't have one. Also another topic for another day. I had something though. I had something that was more normal than what I ended up with, at least. Normal to me, right? Like normal doesn't mean statistically average. Normal means the thing that kind of works for you and feels right to you. I'm not, I'm a little bit of a metalhead. I still like metal. I'm not some aloof, scary, badass person. I'm not dark and mysterious. I'm a nerdy outdoorsman who's into psychology. That's the only thing that I'm ever really capable of being. And it was not until I accepted and embraced that and started reorienting my life in that direction and started to take that road at every fork rather than the one I'd been trying to take for so many years that I actually started to feel human again. That I actually started to feel like I still don't feel like I belong in the world in like I can just go anywhere with anyone and be comfortable kind of way. No, that also I think is not my story, and I don't think it ever will be either. But I am now comfortable with myself and within myself. And that is something for this 10-year period of time that I was lacking. I always wanted to be someone or something other than what I was. And this is only my story, but my story has taught me that I don't think we can do that. I don't think that works. And I think if you're trying to do that, it's just gonna result in you being stuck and frustrated over and over and over again. So if nothing you do seems to be working, rather than re-examining what you are doing, as in the things, the action steps, the strategies, maybe consider re-examining the thing you are trying to do. Are you attempting to organize your life around a thing that is not a fit for you? Are you trying to reach a destination that is inaccessible to you? And if that's the case, and if you're just hitting this wall time and time and time again, maybe we should think about a different destination for you. Maybe this just wasn't ever meant to be the plan. And if you try going in a different direction in your life, which hopefully involves more self-acceptance, because self-denial has not gone well for me. And I don't know that it will for you either. Not to mention how it influences your dating choices. Goth girls be crazy. That's really, if you take nothing else from this video, beware. They're a lot. Um, Thankfully, I was able to get out of that as well. Yet again, another story for another day. I feel like if I continue talking, it's going to get rambly and circular. So hopefully I have made my point by now. I hope that you were able to get some value out of this video. I know it's a little bit different than what I normally do. Everything will probably be back to normal next week with a general psychological concept and psychoeducation, but this was just on my heart today, and I'm not sure why. Hopefully it's because some of you needed to hear it. So take care, and I will see you next time.